It goes back to community, right? When you're building software for free and you're like, well, I'm giving it away, a lot of people just tend to help you, right? Because they're getting a lot of value out of it. And it's not like you're hard selling them like in Gucci loafers on the golf course, right? Like you're building something you love, people respond to the value, and they really helped us.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Hacking Open Source Business Podcast. Avi, how are you doing today?
Doing great. How about you, Matt?
Good. And today we are joined by Tien. Ian, how are you?
Hey, Matt. Hey, Avi. Great to see y'all.
Thanks for being
here. Good to
here.
see you as well. It's been a while, right? So how have things been with you?
Pretty exciting. I think, as you see in the podcasts, like open source is a fantastic business. You know, you've got such it's wonderful to both have a business and a community. I think that's one of the things that is probably the most exciting for me and makes me want to always be on this side of the fence.
Now, Ian, you are the CEO and founder of, or one of the founders of MatterMost. And so, open source chat, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and what MatterMost is.
Yeah, so MatterMost is secure collaboration for technical teams. It's everything from sort of high trust environments, like really strict operating procedures, defense organizations, governments, SRE, SecOps, technology companies, all the way over to sort of financial services and spreads the gamut. So what we really specialize in is like, if you're in a really strict environment, how to get collaboration tools that are easy to use, that are fun, that developers love, that technical teams can really customize and get a lot of value out of. So that's our world and how we've grown over time. Where we kind of started was we were started off as sort of an open source Slack that people really like to have, full data control and to customize and see all the source code. That eventually grew into our commercial products, which some people call Slack for paranoid people, because of the data control and a lot of the security features that we've been asked to develop over time. And we've really branched out since then, where we've got everything from audio calling and screen share, kind of a huddles experience, to incident management and playbooks, so sort of automated and collaborative workflows and checklists to respond really quickly in structured ways when you have to move very, very fast. And we're even bridging over to sort of work management and project management integrated with that communication experience. So it's been quite a journey, and we've been open source all along the way. And very excited to be in the spot where we are right now in that space as the open source project that's a little bit more sort of visible and popular for that segment.
Yeah, and what's weird though is you didn't really start with the vision of the open source Slack for
That's right.
You didn't. Yeah, you didn't start that at all.
Oh no,
Where did you start?
Never guessed. Yeah. So, where I'm coming from is like Steve Ballmer's Microsoft, right? Like that's where I went after college. And it's like, if you kind of pick like the least open sourcey place on the planet in history, and Microsoft's doing a lot of really great things right now. But back in the day, Steve Ballmer's Microsoft is not where you'd find sort of like co-founders of the next open source project. What happened was, I was at that world of Microsoft, I ended up going to graduate school, leaving work for a little bit, and trying on a bunch of ideas. I ended up, building actually a video game company. It was originally an HTML5 game engine, back when HTML5 was kind of hot, and 2D canvas and sort of sprite manipulation was interesting to do, and it's kind of new. And we created this HTML5 game engine. We built a couple games. The game engine really didn't go anywhere sort of commercially. No one wanted to, buy a JavaScript engine where you have all the source code for free anyway. And then we did some games. We kind of became a game studio. We're doing massively multiplayer online games in this, in HTML5, in browsers. It was technically interesting. It was interesting sort of business, but it was a little difficult to, we kind of plateaued at a certain area. And then, along the way, we were building, we were on a messaging system, similar to Slack and HipChat out there, that ended up getting bought by a big player. And what happened was, the acquirer just really neglected it. So it started to sort of bit rot. It would crash. We'd lose data. It was like we had 26 gigs of all of our information, and we couldn't get out of it. Like they wouldn't let us export. when we stopped paying our subscription, they paywalled us from our own information. And, as just sort of technical people, that's like, holy cats, like we have so much risk. This was everything in our company. It was our art pipeline. It was all of our analytics, all of our decision-making, all of our history was in the system that we could not control, that we were essentially renting. And it was just a tremendous amount of risk for us. So, as engineers, what do engineers do when they're upset? They go and build something. So we built we had about 10 million hours of messaging in our video games. And we ended up building our own. We built it 3 times. It was in Python, and we had actually moved to Golang and React at the end of it, the 3rd version. And that 3rd version was working enough for us to kind of get it done, and we ended up open sourcing it. And it got really, really popular fast. And we're ex-Microsoft folks, so we kind of built in a way that was easy to install, easy to manage, single Linux binary, work with MySQL or Postgres, like plain vanilla. So it got really, really popular. And then we had, a couple of, amazing enterprises become our first customers. And then we started moving into public sector. And it's been a great ride ever since. Raised a couple rounds of venture capital. And it's been super exciting.
Yeah, that's a weird arc, right? I mean, going from video game company to, open source collaborative, company.
I did not see that coming. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one of the weirdest stories. Along the way, sort of within months of actually getting some of these big enterprise customers, we got a call from the head of IT at a nuclear weapons facility, and they're like, who are you? I'm like, you called us. We're like MatterMost, right? Like, and then we're like, and who are you? And that, like, how did you get into our facilities? How did you get our engineers start using your software? You have to have clearance. You're not allowed to kind of be in here, right? And we were taken aback because we had no idea we were in these facilities. And, I kind of explained who we were and what we did. And it was very obvious that like we didn't really know what we were doing, right? In terms of like federal sales or being in those environments. But in those really strict environments, they have nothing. Like the tools are so terrible, right? They're air gap networks, everything's hyper secure, but they can use open source. And, they can use open source tools and run them. And over time, they kind of become sort of hardened official. So what happened was this IT leader helped us understand, okay, like it was really clear we didn't know what we were doing. So he's like, okay, I'm going to help you. So internally, you have to have multiple teams run security checklists. You have it's a double confirm. You get on some special list. Then we have to go through a reseller and go through a procurement process. But it was really amazing. And it goes back to community, right? When you're building software for free and you're like, well, I'm giving it away, a lot of people just tend to help you, right? Because they're getting a lot of value out of it. And it's not like you're hard selling them like in Gucci loafers on the golf course, right? Like you're building something you love. People respond to the value, and they really helped us, become a vendor to the federal government. And you can find us in all across Department of Defense. You can find us in Air Mobility Command. And it's just, and all these different federal agencies. So it's been really amazing, and having transparency and community and a lot of, really end user adoption has been core to this business. It's almost a business that we didn't really expect or invent. It just kind of was created out of a sort of prod market fit.
That's so interesting. We at Scarf, we see quite a bit of open source projects that are being used in various government settings, and they have no idea that that's the case. And one of the things when we talk to some of those companies or projects is that they don't really know what to do about that. Also, it's really new for a lot of people when they dive into it. I'm really curious to get your take on this. So when you were posed with, there's all these compliance security requirements that we now have for you, that was probably a really heavy lift for your team at the time. I assume was quite small. How did you make the call to, invest all that time into, deals that might take a really, really long time to happen versus all of the much lower hanging fruit that you probably had right in front of you? Like, how were you thinking about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of our very first customers, and we were like nothing, like we're still making video games. They're definitely Fortune 500, a name everyone's heard of. And their security team came and they were like, hey, our red team tested you. Here's 7 security vulnerabilities. And we sort of insist that you fix them. And they were kind of shocked when we're said, first of all, okay. And they were shocked when we came back 10 days later and it was completely done. And the reason we reacted, and they were shocked by that, because it's not how a lot of open source companies or open source projects react. The difference is, and this is kind of a good thing coming from Steve Ballmer's Microsoft, is that we knew security, right? Like we were trained at sort of Microsoft level security and trust, and we knew it was always important. And of course, we prioritized that. So it was a little bit of, it's a lot about culture and context. So we came from an environment where that was the expectation. And that's not the expectation in sort of like the mean average open source project to be coming from like one of the most secure like companies in the world. So that's how it worked for us. But I think there's a lot of folks out there who are just like, they just like get crushed under, it's not what they want to do. And in some ways that actually plays to a business model opportunity, right? So when you think about MatterMost or any sort of open core project, we have a paid offering on top of the open source. A lot of the compliance features are not things that devs are like, yes, let me create e-discovery compliance, right? And like all this export like knobs and dials, like no one does that. So guess what? Those go in our commercial offering, right? So, part of the principle of creating a really great project is to say, okay, here's the things that developers love. We co-build the future. We have 4,000 contributors, 30,000 code contributions. And, that's the place where we all sort of work together. And we're really, really clear that like, hey, there's a paid product and there's these compliance features that we're not going to put in the free product. And that's part of a roadmap. And like, everyone knows this when you sign up for the project, we're always transparent so that people don't come back and be like, oh, like, you're not freedom, whatever. But being really transparent and have that separation of that compliance component outside of the core project has been, I think, a really valuable separation. And it just makes it's an accelerant for the business. It creates clarity for our community. So I'd really encourage folks who might be thinking about creating open core projects to have that divide, right? What is it developers love and what does developers don't like to do?
Yeah, I guess security is probably often one of those things where you just, it really naturally goes as a thing that companies will just pay for, and you can kind of lump into the, table stakes for that. That's really interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, everybody needs it. Nobody really wants to deal with it. They just want it done, right? And I mean, obviously that hasn't worked too well, right? But, so thank goodness we do have, companies that are looking out for, the security of a lot of the companies that are running it out there.
Have there been times where, sorry, go ahead if you want to.
Just on that, like security is, I'd say compliance is like on one end, which is like e-discovery kind of like corporate things. I think security is for like, we take security really serious in terms of vulnerability patching and all that goes out to the community. It's a little bit more when we think about this compliance type style of security, right? Which is like, I need to monitor messages. I need to like for our financial services customers, we have to push to enterprise information archiving systems like SMARsh and Global Relay, like that kind of compliance. You want the product to always be sort of secure. And then what we offer in the advanced version is sort of like, it's less about security, it's more about scale, right? Like you can lock it down, but like there's these convenience features, which is, access control automation and all these different pieces that are definitely scale and compliance features you can put somewhere else. But the core product should always be secure. You can set it up that way.
Have there been times where it's a little bit less clear about whether a given feature should go into the open core or into the business? Like there's so many times where, something could attract a lot more developers, but it could also help you make more money if you gated it. And like, is there a framework that you use to make those decisions? Is it very ad hoc? How do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we try to have a really simple framework, and I think it could be simpler. But the simple thing is it's really about something called buyer-based open core. Who is the buyer for this open source project? Like, who's the buyer? Like the economic sort of consumer of this for our MatterMost sort of team edition, which is the open source. Then we've got sort of like a professional edition, and then we've got sort of an enterprise. And it's less about like what we try to avoid is a good, better, best, right? It's not a happy meal or whatever you call it. But it's about like, if I'm on the enterprise version, right, it's about scale and advanced compliance and big teams. We're talking like, you're hundreds of users on the enterprise. So that's really clear. And then on the teams version, that's for like, hey, I've got a team. This is my team. I know everybody. We work together on the team, right? And then I can work in a certain way. Now, the way that I work is going to be it's going to be default open, right? It's not like I control you, you control me. There's lots of knobs to dial. No, it's like we're in a team. We're going to create great slash commands and do all these integrations and do instant response. And I know everybody, right? And then once you kind of get over that, so then it's a really clear identity. It's like, this is for teamwork. And then as in that middle SKU, you kind of get into this middle area where it's sort of advanced access controls, which is like, I don't really like, it's multiple teams, right? It's not a whole enterprise, but it's multiple teams. It's just like, well, what are the features I need for multiple teams? I don't know everyone, so I need to have some access control and some automation, but I'm not all the way to like massive scale. So it's really about the identity of each of those offerings and aligning to that. So it's always about value to the end user. And as long as we're clear about that, then everything sort of works.
Yeah, and that's got to be hard to stick to some of those, categories and stay with, focused on those demographics sometimes, because it's so easy to say like, oh, let's add this additional, subset of, community, or this additional user base, or let's chase, this demographic. And sometimes that can take your focus off of that. How do you stay focused on the right demographic when there's so many, other opportunities potentially out there, or so many voices out there to say like, oh, we should try this, we should try that. How do you prevent that shiny object syndrome?
Oh, that's a great question. So we actually run, for better or worse, MatterMost kind of like Microsoft Office. Right. So how Microsoft Office works is like there's like tickets, right? So let's compare Microsoft Office to like Linux, right? Like Microsoft Office has a plan, right? And it's got a bunch of tickets, right? And how MatterMost works is like you can use any of those tickets. Like there's tickets open to the community. There's tickets that we do internally, but there's a portion of tickets that we make open to the community. Right. Some of them are kind of fun projects. We want to invite people to participate. Some are just sort of like, we can't get to this. It's a little bit on a backlog. It feels safe enough to put in the community. It's structured enough. And then that's the system, right? So when people come in, there's in our contribution guidelines, everything. It's like, okay, this is how you do it. You can get tickets. If you want to invent something, that's fine. There's a forum to go in to discuss that and to upvote and to have conversations around it. But only MatterMost, like the maintainers, turn things into extra tickets people can work on. So we've got a really clear system for that. Contrast that with something like, Linux or other projects where just like, I'm just going to code stuff and like give you a diff file and like maybe you'll like it and let's discuss. That is it's a different culture. It's a different way to work. It's not our way. Like for us, I would be like, I take it personally. If we ever have the experience where someone actually creates a code contribution, right, following the guidelines, and we don't accept it, like I feel like very bad. Like I don't want people spending their time working on stuff that doesn't get accepted in the project, right? Like that'd be the worst for me. And it's happened like once or twice where we made a mistake or something. I get personally involved and I apologize because I think it's just such a bad experience. Like if you come to MatterMost, you want to be part of our community, you're going to have clarity on what to build. You're going to have a list of tickets. You're going to understand, how this stuff gets integrated, and you have a high level of certainty to become part of the open source project. And, that's a difference for us. That's how we think about, that's a difference for us. That's our culture. And there's many different ways to do it. That's just how we do it.
That's a really interesting metric that I don't think I've ever heard of. Like how many submitted pull requests are just rejected?
Oh my God,
that a project gets.
Yeah, like that's just a terrible experience. Like
that would be one to like you want to keep that at 0 if you can. And I'm kind of I've never thought about that before. I'm kind of curious if there are other ones like that where you really want to, like, if you see even one time of it happening, it's a alarm bell. You got to go do something about it. Huh.
Well, I think that's definitely something that you see where people do have a bad experience, and there are projects who do reject on a regular basis. I don't know which's worse though, rejecting or ignoring, because each one can have a different connotation. Like if you reject something and you can talk to them and explain it, I think it's easier than just ignoring it.
No, it's we have I think we may or may not have this. I can't remember. I thought we had like a template someplace where if you just didn't follow the guidelines, like if you don't submit like a ticket number that you're working on, I think that's an auto reject, right? It's been a while, but like, don't ignore. Right. And rejection's not bad if it's just like, if the rejection is sort of like you didn't follow the instructions, that's okay. People are learning. Right. It's okay. So I wouldn't even count that as a bad metric. Right. So but I would count, the only metric I'd count bad is if like we started code reviewing it and then it got down the stage and then like we asked people to change things, they changed things that got down and then we rejected them. That'd be like the horrible experience. But I have absolutely zero problem with, you didn't follow the instructions. Here's like a bot like that just gives you the instructions and you can try again. Like that's totally fine.
In fact, that's probably like a recommended thing for any like largely scaled open source project. You're going to get a lot of just kind of some garbage pull requests for sure.
No, why would you ever get garbage pull requests? That's just silly. No one.
Well, there's a free T-shirt on the other line if you get. You never know.
Yeah, meet those requirements to get the free swag. That's always funny. So, Ian, coming into the open source space, what was probably the most surprising thing? Coming from a non-open source background, what was the one thing that you're just like was so shocking for those who might be entering the open source space now to kind of maybe get ahead of that shocking moment?
Gosh, I think it really depends on your context, because the one thing that happened between Steve Ballmer's Microsoft and running an open source company was I actually made video games for a number of years, right? And it was the video game community and the open source community are very, very different. And Microsoft has a lot of community as well. So I was shocked by how nice the open source community is, right? Like it's, and people will be like, people will trash talk on like Hacker News or like open source. And then people are like, like, and it's like a nothing burger. Like if you've ever moderated like an MMO forum, right? And you go to like Hacker News or like a GitHub repo, it's like night and day difference, right? Like what people get offended on in these sort of open source, technical forums is so it's a really nice community. If that's the worst thing that can happen, right? It's like, it's a very like sternly worded technical argument. Like that is just, that's so nice, right? Compared to some of the other places that are online communities in the world.
So we heard it here first. To deal with conflict resolution and to get better at that, you should go moderate forums in gaming communities. That's what
you're training with weights on, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like you're playing basketball carrying like 50-pound ankle bracelets. Yeah, it's and then you're like, yeah. So I really think that I just love the open source community, right? People are so thoughtful. So like the amount of attention, like the amount of thought that goes into like the smallest thing is just so wonderful to see, like, the smallest thing get all this attention and people talking about it and being really thoughtful in the responses. Like if you think about like the future, like it's sort of Star Trek Next Generation and just like, everyone gets along. Like I feel like open source is the closest you can probably be to those communities.
Wow. Bringing out the Star Trek reference.
Yeah, I bought the 10-pack. It was like on sale. So I got like all 10 movies and I watched them all in a row, except the last one.
Okay. But what was your favorite one of the 10?
Oh, that's a tough one. Wrath of Khan, of course, is great. Like Star Trek 4, Voyage Home was great. Yeah, everyone says like, what is it, Generations or no, First Contact was supposed to be really good. I was like, meh. I probably like the old school.
The old school ones? Okay.
I think the old school ones had like better humor, like not better humor, but it was just a little bit less. I don't know. Something about the old school is just easier for me to like relate with.
That's okay. That's okay. We're all a little old school now and then, right? That's always good. There be whales in Star Trek 4, right? So, great movie. So if you were going to start a new open source company, go back maybe to your younger self and give one piece of advice to that younger self on getting started in the open source space. What would that one piece of advice be?
Oh, gosh. I think we've been super lucky in how we executed. I'd say write things down. Right, like I'd basically like document the business model as much as you document like the product, right? Like in the first, sort of, when we started, like I was doing sales, I was doing all documentation, like I was customer support, right? Like I was like everything, but I didn't, I didn't like write down like an instruction. We wrote a lot of instructions how to install the product, and I wish I wrote instructions on how to do all the sort of go-to-market, the early things. What really matters is the go-to-market motion, which is just really like understanding your customers deeply, like building relationships. the hard part with our business model is that it's a proven move. The beautiful thing is it's a proven move, right? Prove is like use the open source, it works. Then you move them over to the paid, and then they expand, and that's just like a proven move motion. It's just not that common. And the way you make that motion really work is when you do the prove and do the move, they'll come in, they'll be like, I want a quotation request, I want discounting, I want you to talk about this MSA. At that point, like the muscle memory for a lot of folks is to like close the deal and book the revenue. But that is your opportunity to get into the organization, right? And really build the relationships with the champions who don't really want to be talked to, and understand, what they really need. So I'd say, if I can go back and give myself one piece of advice, it's really write down, what the sales motion that really, really works on our, that really, really works for an open core proven move model, because it's kind of unique, right? And, we get there over time, but I think we slowed down a little bit because, that sort of transfer knowledge wasn't there.
This is very pertinent to me right now, doing a lot of these things myself too. So I want to dig more into this proven move idea. With MatterMost specifically, was this largely users coming to you with things, or were you going to them? What was the breakdown of that?
Yeah, so in enterprise motions, it's really a multi-stakeholder like sale, right? And what you're going to have the end users who love it. Right. So our motion is basically, someone will install us, Linux binary, MySQL, Postgres. People are actually using our Kubernetes operator now, which is even better. So it's like, I install it, I like it, it's open source, it works for my team. A little time goes by, they look in the admin console, like, holy crap, there's like 50 to 100 people. I don't know who these people are. Right. So they're like, okay, well, multiple teams are on it. I'm using it. This is clearly a shared service. Hey, like DevTools admin, can you go and hey, DevTools admin, this is in production now. Can you manage it? And then the DevTools admin, IT admin, system admin, whoever it is, basically goes to our website and they're like, okay, well, I need SAML SSO and Active Directory integration for all these people. Okay, that's in the paid tier, obviously, right? Because they've seen open core products before. That's where we get the reach out, and that's where our customer teams kind of take over, and then they might need MSAs, they might have to go through reseller, whatever it is. That's kind of our motion. So it's really about understanding those different personas, and really just making sure you orient what you provide to what they want. And the most important thing, don't get them confused. Don't try to sell to that developer who has no budget and no interest, right? Who's only running a single team. Wait till it gets multi-team and talk to the IT person whose responsibility is to make developers successful.
So in the early days of that, when you're seeing some companies start to become customers, they've been using it for a while. Like you have that time where they're just using it for free. Is that something that you were at any point working to cut down faster? One question that I hear people ask is for a lot of open source companies is, well, how long is your sales cycle? It's kind of a weird question to answer because, when does it really start and how do you think about optimizing? Because it's not really clear when you should really have a very active role in it necessarily versus just kind of let them come to you. So there were many questions baked into that. I apologize, but maybe I'll just kind of leave it there and get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think on a metrics, in the context of metrics and how long is a sales cycle and how you think about it, I think it's really about segmentation. The same way that a small medium business cycle is going to be a lot shorter usually than an enterprise cycle with a lot less sort of variability. I think the same way with open core, right? It's always about segmenting the different audiences. Some are just going to be free forever. They're sort of nope, we're open source hardcore. We'd rather fork your project and add the spit and glue and get all the features we need. And we never need to talk to you, but thank you very much. And we're fine with that, right? And then, and we're totally fine with that. There's wonderful customers out there that we spend time with that actually contribute back and are really great parts of the community, and they'll still have a certain take. But a lot of our what we call the ICP, the ideal customer profile, is going to be these enterprises who have these strict regulatory requirements, but still want to be productive. They want to reduce risk. They want to have control of their collaboration. They want to make everyone more efficient. And in that frame, they're always going to buy, right? Now, it's a question of when they're going to buy, but they're always going to buy as they scale. Because it's just their model. It's how they consume software. So in in those spaces, it turns out to be, it's almost like the take a traditional sales cycle, but like kind of move it to the POC, and it's kind of around that stage. And you want to, and it's going to be very different in our sort of like federal business versus our commercial business. It'll be very different for if it's a, so the variables are going to be, is it a large enterprise, or is it a small, medium business, or somewhere in between? Is it a public sector or private sector business? And that'll determine budget cycles. And then it'll also determine sort of use case and culture. So we tend to do the best where if the managers are technical, like we're in, right? If the managers know how to code, they're technical or ex-technical, like that's our sweet spot. So there's a lot of tech giants and wonderful companies out there that are in that sweet spot. There's another one which takes it a longer, but eventually gets there. It's organizations where the developers really like us, but the managers aren't technical and they don't understand why you need something like MatterMost when you have like, oh, there's Microsoft Teams, right? Like I can send emojis there. It's like I can send an Office document. And they're like, why can't
do you need?
Yeah, it's like, oh, this works for me. Like, what's the difference? And then developers get frustrated, and all these, all this stuff ensues, and we might get run, and we actually do get run as shadow IT there much longer, in those organizations. So that's the kind of segmentation. There's sort of the sweet spot or ideal customer profile, and that adoption curve, and those sort of. The adoption curve and those characteristics are pretty consistent. And then there's going to be the outliers on both sides, like the free forevers, and then the sort of like little bit less, like the more heterogeneous organizations.
Digging a bit deeper into the metric side, you talked a little bit about segmentation there, but are there certain key metrics, especially considering from an open source perspective, that you look at to get your pulse on the business? Are there certain, key things that you're always kind of evaluating and looking at on a month-to-month basis?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of metrics. I think, there's definitely a lot of metrics. We actually definitely look at search a lot. What are people like looking for? Because that's a lot of our traffic. They'll actually search for MatterMost by name. We definitely have digital channels that go out there, and we look at those channels as sort of top of the funnel metrics and show us. Of course, pipeline is super important. We're a lot of our audience is very privacy focused, so it's not like telemetry is going to be a huge part of us. We'll get some, and it'll be anonymized, and we have we actually are very explicit with our telemetry policy, and we tell people like this is why and this is what, and you can turn it off if you want. So it's a little bit more spotty there, and then we're going to be more focused on probably like the customers that are in pipe, which take a while, right? So they're going to be like, hey, I'm interested. I probably have a free deployment. We need to move it through like these security checklists, this MSA negotiation, this internal committee, and then it sort of goes there. So I think the pipeline. So I'd say like top of the funnel, you're looking for search and website, digital body language. Then you've got then really about like, are they sort of engaged with us? Because they kind of go through a dark piece where they're just like using us with telemetry off, and then they'll pop up sort of in the sort of leads, sales accepted leads, MQLs, piped opportunities, and moving through the process. So it's all just machines and metrics, and those are. And for a lot of the folks that we've talked to in that space, we all have the same problems. Like developers don't want to, like developers understand telemetry and they just like, they just avoid it. So that's where we are.
How did the open source part of your community respond when you first introduced the telemetry?
It was there since the beginning. So it's not like,
oh, okay. So got it.
Like, yeah. That's a really important point, is that there's a lot of things in open source that you can't really introduce, right? Like it has to be at the start. Telemetry is one, and I think the open core model is a second. Like if you plan to run an open source business and you haven't declared your open core model and your telemetry, then like you're gonna run into it, right?
Yeah, it's hard to come retroactively apply those later.
Yeah.
That's one of those nasty surprises for people in the community.
Yeah, you just kind of look at the date stamp. You're like, oh, like blah 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 blah. It's like, oh yeah, like 12 months ago in this post we were really explicit, and they're like, oh, yeah. So,
yeah, same for licenses, I guess too. It's just
yes.
Setting people's expectations up front is very very critical, and I think just being very explicit about what the intentions are, the incentives and stuff, really key for a thriving community that lasts.
Yeah. And I think that, avoid surprises. I think that's a really good piece of advice, right? So avoid surprising people. People don't like surprises.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. like if they're using this open source project, they have all these plans for it, and then like someone adds like a monetization model, and they figure out that like they're not going to get what they wanted. Like that's a really big deal.
Yeah. People don't even like surprise birthday parties. I'm just telling everybody. Everybody's watching. No surprise birthday parties. Okay. Just saying.
Did someone just try to throw you a surprise birthday
No, but I would hate it if they did. So please don't.
There's someone behind you with a cake that's like turning around.
Yeah. They just left the room. Yeah. That's how it works. But we've seen a lot of growth, not just in the open source space in general, but all through the tech industry over the last couple of years. I just saw today, or actually I think it was yesterday, that Red Hat is now making $1 billion on OpenShift, right? So that's a lot of money coming from one specific area. And so that really speaks to the rise of Kubernetes and kind of that growth in that space. But what have you seen in terms of like, growth in not only the open source space, but maybe some technologies like Kubernetes or other things that are similar?
Yeah, it's crazy to see how like open source, there's a, cliche, I guess, open source is eating the world after software is eating the world. And, there's this, I'm ex-Microsoft, and the thing that we talked about back then is like software doesn't depreciate. It doesn't break down. Like, it might have a bug or two, but it'll just keep working forever. Right. So, the question is, as you build more open source infrastructure, you're going to build, it's like, sure, the proprietary stuff, speeds ahead because they've got a lot more capital to deploy, but over time, open source catches up, right? The arc of history is long, but it, bends towards open source. And MatterMost, where we are on that journey, is kind of at the collaboration layer, right? So we've got like databases are gone, right? Like operating systems are kind of gone. Now you've got this containerization orchestration layer that's kind of gone to open source, and collaboration is just another layer. And it's this kind of, you're really going for market share, and you're really kind of becoming the de facto standard over time. And we might not be, the newest and the shiniest, but like everyone's looking at open source, like it's just a matter of time. So, in our space, there's 3 segments, right? There's the first mover, which you could say is Slack, right? They did a lot of really wonderful, innovative things. Then you have the incumbent, which is Microsoft Teams, which is everywhere, it's de facto. And then the third segment, which is what I'm most excited about, is the open source segment, right? And these 3 segments at every layer, right? Even at every layer, it's the same. So what we're seeing with Kubernetes and Red Hat and OpenShift is that open source layer just ending up where it's supposed to be, right? There's like, I don't say zero chance, but very, very slim chance that's going to flip over to something proprietary. It'd have to be like, like 3 times better, 3 times cheaper in order to displace what open source is kind of carving out as its base.
What about the cloud though? I mean, from a cloud perspective, a lot of people talk about, the as a service, it's not really open source. You see like, companies like Snowflake who are like, oh, we're just cloud only. We're not even going to do any open source. We're just, we're going to go that direction. Where does that balance between open source and the cloud and as a service kind of play?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So that's probably, I think, on that next generation. So let's say we take the different categories, and then I think the categories go towards open source. Then you have this. Well, if I'm a cloud, right? Can I just like mimic the? So let's make a. So I think that is a differentiation between open source and open standards, right? So open source is like MySQL, it's like Postgres, it's like MatterMost, but an open standard is the MySQL API. Right. So now, if I'm Amazon, I've got Aurora and I've got RDS that are using the open standard, right, to actually innovate beyond what the open source project did with scale and all these other sort of, really powerful properties. So I think that, yeah, open standard. So, and enterprises kind of want both, right? So there's 2 different value props. There's open source, which is kind of an open standard when it gets to scale. That's going to let you have transparency and customize it and do all these wonderful things with the open source. Then as things get popular, you got another piece, which is the open standard. And enterprises really want that as well, because what they want is they want multiple vendors to be on the same standard, so no one can sort of hold them hostage, and they have that choice and flexibility among vendors. So, that's kind of how I think about the difference between the 2 in the future. They're going to be, you have open source taking over share from segments, and you have open standards keeping the open source companies on their toes and saying like, well, we're going to do like, okay, now you got MariaDB and you got RDS and Aurora. right? And how are things going to, and how does the market lay out after that? And at the end of the day, it's the consumer that wins. It's the buyer, the person who uses these services that's going to get the benefit of increasing efficiency.
So I guess on the, the more technical side of MatterMost, I'm really curious just for let's say for 2023, what are some things that you're building that you're really excited about? Like what's the cool stuff happening in this open source community?
The most important thing for us, I say, the theme is really accelerate repeatability through focus. And we have so many amazing use cases. Like I just got off a customer call before this, and I just love these calls. So the saying is, bring tools to your developers. Don't bring developers to your tools. And they talk about MatterMost as a command center, and it's about like these people who live in terminal, live in shell environments, and just they never want to touch the mouse, right? Everything's a / command, and it's and I think just kind of doubling. And what we've found is like a lot of missed opportunities sometimes with MatterMost. Like we do a lot of sort of features and usability and scalability and performance, and what we're realizing is that a lot of what people really want are templates. Right. And really simple, like to get that DevOps command center, right? What people really want is the semantics, right? Because originally when MatterMost started, it was all these like hardcore engineers that were really good at process and configuring things. And they would just build out these sort of like palaces, right? Like we would walk into companies and the CIO would be like, well, I can't leave MatterMost because like all these / commands to our internal tools are there. And you did a great job of that. There's someone behind him who's like, I built those. I don't me. So you've got and what the most important thing is like, how do we take this amazing work that these, that all of our MatterMost champions have done that are super technical and strong, and make it accessible to the folks that are maybe in that sort of middle of the Gaussian distribution, right? That might not have like the tippy top skills, but how can we give them more templates and examples and really train them up. So we've got training, but we actually want to think about opening a certification program. How do you become sort of like a MatterMost sort of expert? And it's really about taking, the most common one is just like webhooks, right? You can lock down a lot of things in MatterMost, like a lot of IT does, but the webhooks are just kind of like, you open them up and you let people use them. And what they do is they take the markdown templates and the webhooks, and they can just create just amazing sort of like micro apps, right? So you can do, burn down charts. You can do, stand-up meetings. You can do you can get lists of, you can do all these, great, command line interactions to get lists of defects. So the example we had from one customer was they were doing a bug bash, right? The old way, which was bring developers to your tools and like, what's the ticket and what's the ticket number? And I fix it and I got to go back and what's the ticket number again? And they moved it over to MatterMost, and the engagement was like dramatically higher, right? It's like in the channel, I can see the things pop up, like people close them, people using / commands, people are manipulating them. And it just keeps people in flow, right? I think the thing that developers are really, people just don't understand. It's like when you bug a developer, like, they're in the zone, they have it all like loaded in their head. And if you like tap their shoulder, like the Jenga tower falls to the ground and they have to start all over again, right? So being able to keep developers in flow, bring the tools to the developers, not the developers to the tools, is just a huge difference. So, that's one of the things that we're doing in the next year is like, how do we provide more templates and enablement and training and certification and examples so that sort of like the middle can be as productive as the top.
Yeah, I think a lot of people now, they want that automation as much as possible. If you can give them easy to follow things, they're going to use it. I mean, we've seen with the rise of, ChatGTP, rewrite my article, like give me advice on this, whatever. Anything that we can do to bring automation and reduce the extra clicks, the extra work we've got, I think people are going to appreciate, definitely.
Also, automating is fun.
Yeah. For Avi, automation is fun for you, huh? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Who doesn't like automating stuff? It's the best.
Yeah, I completely
Anyway.
agree. And just add, like, and for us, our customer base, a lot of mission critical real time operation support, and it's not a nice to have, it's a must have, right? Like cyber and SRE, like the things are just getting more complex and sort of more dangerous out in the world. It's exponential growth. So you have to have automation, you have to have AI, you have to have these things that replace human beings, because human beings cannot physically move fast enough. And and we have customers, they're getting 10x returns on speed, right? They're before, like, literally, and this is mind blowing. It's like they had like the security team writing an email, creating a zip file, packaging all up to like send an alert out. And they always like get the CC list or someone missing. So, and this is where MatterMost, like, we have this playbooks product for incident response. And this is where it kind of came from, which is that they built all this custom code and they described it to us, and we just end up building that into the product for everyone to use. Right. So now when you go in, the first time you do incident response, you got to pull these reports, you have to notify these people, you got all these checklist things. And then there's a retrospective built in with the system. And, after the retrospective, you come back, the next time it happens, you've gone from sort of like 10 minutes to like 2 seconds, because everything's automated. All the reports go in automatically. All the people are brought into the channel's automatically created. It's, it is, you got it. And that's just kind of where the world needs to go. You have to have all these processes that are going to be very complex. You have to systematize them so you can reduce risk, you can reduce error rates, and you can keep your teams from burning out. Mm-hmm. So we definitely see that. It's not a nice to have anymore. Like automation, AI, it's a must have.
Yeah. So thanks for that, Ian. So we are now at the point where we are in rapid fire mode. So Ian, if you're not aware of rapid fire mode, what we do is I throw out really quick questions just to get really quick responses. And we try and get through, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, 30, whatever ones, however long we want to go. It's rapid fire mode. It's the highlight of our podcast here. And so I like to start with, a couple of fairly easy ones for you. And hopefully they're easy. Some people get stumped at the first ones. But what is your favorite open source tool? And no, you cannot use MatterMost.
Oh gosh, I can't say Pine, right? Pine.
Oh, wow.
I'm not familiar. What is that?
Oh, ouch. Oh.
It's really old.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go look it up. Go look it up.
Right,
you're going to say Pine. Okay, fine, Pine.
Okay.
Well, like today, what are you using today? What is the one open source software that you can't live without? And I know that's not Pine.
Yeah. So what do I live without? Chromium.
Yeah, everybody says that. Everybody's
good answer.
Chrome is it's so embedded in everything now. So I think that no one can get away from it. I'm gonna have to put an exclusion in future podcasts for that. So in the last year, what is the best book that you've read or movie that you've seen, or both, if you want to answer both?
The Pig That Wants to Be Eaten. So it's a book of like, just basically like I never had a classical education, so take a philosophy course and boil down like each lecture into like 2 pages.
Oh,
and
wow.
That's the pig that it's and I do it just before, and I try to have screens off before I go to sleep. So this is the book I'll read 2 pages, and it's just a really nice bite-sized philosophy. There's another podcast called Philosophize This that's a good companion, because it goes through, it's kind of like the Coles Notes.
Oh, cool. Yeah, very cool. Okay, and so what's your theme song? If you have to pick a theme song, like your introduction, your walk up, you're going to walk up on stage, you're going to talk, you're going to give a TED talk, you're going to hit the mound and throw out the first pitch.
When you say theme song, I just think Wooka Chaka from like Ally McBeal. like
fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. Everybody has their own. That's cool, and out of curiosity, what is the first concert that you've ever been to?
Bare Naked Ladies.
Bare Naked Ladies. Nice. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Well, Ian, you've survived rapid fire mode, so that was it. See, that wasn't so hard. That wasn't really.
It's like you've gone so slow. There were only 3. It's like
you really talked it way up this time.
The pine threw us off. Let's just be honest. Yeah. Fair enough. Ian, thank you for coming on and chatting with us today. We hope this was good. This was a great conversation for us. We do appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you, Avi. Thank you, Yonk. It was a pleasure.
Yep.
Thanks so
And
much.
don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel. We would appreciate it.
Yep,
All right,
we'll do.
until next time.